Hello and welcome to my part 2 of making a pumpkin. So I'm going to be turning it into a tea light holder with these two beautiful magpies sitting atop. So let's get started. First of all, I unwrap the pumpkin where it's been slowly drying under layers of plastic. And it's now at a leather hard stage, so it's nice and firm, holding its shape. It can still be cut into, carved into, painted. At this point, I want to make the opening for the tea light to be able to go into. So I'm just scoring out the line, marking it out where I want to cut it open. And you can use a template to cut round something, which is why I was holding up a rib just then. But I tend to do it by freehand, really, by eye. I'm using my potter's knife just to slice into that so that now I've opened up a nice kind of doorway. And in the past I have used that to make kind of a fairy door. So you might want to hold on to that if that's what you want to do with your pumpkin. I'm just taking out the tissue paper, and you'll see in my last video why I use tissue paper. Removing most of it. Anything that's left in there will just burn out. And if you're not opening up your pumpkin, you're just going to glaze it as an ornament, then that paper will burn out in the kiln, so just leave it in there. I'm about to reach for my flat looped kind of carving tool, and I'm just going to scrape the surface of the pumpkin so that it's nice and flat and smooth, because you want your tea light to sit on there nicely. And then I turn it upside down, and where I've pushed in to shape the pumpkin, quite often the ceiling comes down quite low, which means that it can snuff out the candle a bit too easy. So I just remove some clay from that so that it doesn't hang quite so low and is out of the way of the flame. And then I'm just going to neaten up the entrance, so I might kind of carve quite a bit off to reshape it, or to just make sure that the excess clay is taken away. At the bottom I make it a little bit flatter, and it just takes any jagged bits off too, because you don't want any sharp bits. Anything that's left there will fire exactly how you leave it, so and create quite sharp little bits, so you want to make sure that's nice and smooth. I'm going to be turning this into a magpie pumpkin, so I've just measured out a little bit of clay, held it up to the pumpkin to check the size, and now I'm going to start sculpting them, so one at a time. I'm lengthening the clay, and you can see when I'm sculpting I'm not really adding too much onto it. I'm using one lump of clay and then drawing it out into the shape. And I've made a lot of these magpies, so I'm not doing it from a picture at the moment, but if you feel like you need a picture, then go and grab that and make sure that you bring that up, depending on what kind of creature you want to make. And you can see that I'm pinching off clay as I go, so anything that's like the tail's looking too long, I'll pinch that off. I take stuff from underneath the neck, I smooth it all out as well as I go. So I've sped it up so you don't see in real time how long this takes, but I am taking my time just to make sure. And there we go, there's one made, and then I go ahead and make the other one. I'm lengthening clay. I'm making sure that see, I pinched off a little bit of clay there, excess clay, so don't be afraid to take that away, and you can add some more as well if you take too much off. And one of the things that I find with sculpting is there's always a point where you think, oh my gosh, where is this going? This looks like a potato, or just anything but the thing that you're trying to aim for. But keep going, you'll work through it, and then at some point you can see that I keep adjusting the clay, keep pulling it out, keep moving it around, and at some point it's suddenly gonna just come to life. And I've put it on the pumpkin just to check where I want to place them. And it's at this point I suddenly realised that I hadn't added any wings to my beautiful magpies. So I'm rolling out a little sausage of clay, and I tend to find when it's smaller sausages, I don't roll it out flat on a desk. I do it between my hands upright. And this sausage of clay is going to have 2 pointed ends. So there you go. So it's got a thicker middle, 2 pointed ends. And then I don't show it very well here, but I'm just cutting that in at the halfway point, so that I have made it into 2 parts. So that's going to be the 2 wings. And the reason why I do this is so that it's symmetrical, so they're the same size. So I add some slip onto the back of the birds and then add each wing, and they go from the breast and then across the back, so they sit across the back. And then I just blend it in at the front by the breast and then also up over the top. And I use my fingers for all of this. You can use a tool, of course, but I love sculpting with my hands. So I'm using a finger just to drag that up, but also here I'm showing you that I use the back of my finger as well. So I'm using my fingernail kind of as the smooth tool to really blend that into. And then a bit more slip for the other wing. Knocked him over. Check he's all right. So I'm going to place this again from the front at the breast of the bird, but then crossing over the magpie wings. And again, I'm going to use my fingertips just to smooth that in, press it down, make sure that's nicely stuck on, and then smooth down the top. I don't smooth the underneath. I want it to have the appearance of, you know, these wings can lift off at any moment. They're going to fly away at any moment. And I leave the 2 end points crossed. I pinched that off just because it was a bit long. And then the important thing to do whenever you're sculpting is to really turn it around and look at it from all angles, because you're making something that's 3D, so you want to make sure that it doesn't look a bit strange from various different angles, and keep adjusting it. Now we have the first magpie. So on to the next one. I'm going to speed this one up but show you what I'm doing. So again, I've rolled out the slither of clay, cut it in half so I've got the 2 equal lengths, and then adding it onto the bird, smoothing it out with my fingertips, using slip to stick them on. And there we have the second bird, the second magpies. And I absolutely adore magpies. They are in my garden. I can hear them all the time whilst I'm working, so they often come to mind now when I'm making my creations. And here they are, flying in to my pumpkin. And here I'm just gonna check how I want them to sit. So I'm holding it in place, just adjusting, one of them looking up at the other one. I think that gives it some kind of story. They look very cute. Decided that one needs to sit back a bit and look ahead more. I've found that if I just stick the birds on with a bit of slip, they can be a bit delicate. So I cut some nichrome wire, which I get in a reel, and I've cut 2 small amounts off and then curved them round. And then I score and slip where I want the first magpie to sit. And I'm just pushing that nichrome wire. It's a high fire wire, so it's going to work beautifully in the high temperatures of the kiln. And that sticks out and sticks into the pumpkin. And then when I push the bird onto that, it's got an extra safe fixing onto the pumpkin. So I score the bottom of the magpie too, make sure that it's got plenty of grip to that slip that I've added there, and I push it onto the wire for a nice firm fit. And then I notice, I look around where it's also touching the pumpkin in other places. So there I've just put a bit of slip down the side where the top of the tail is also touching the pumpkin. And it's quite awkward to work like this because I wanted to show you on camera, but I can't see myself particularly well. So I'm going to go and do the other magpie, and I'm scoring where they're going to make contact with both the bottom of the magpie and on the pumpkin. And I'm adding a bit more of that nichrome wire again, so it's curved over, and push that into the pumpkin. Add the slip, plenty of slip. You want it to have a nice glued contact. Yeah, it's flying in. I was having way too much fun with these magpies. And I push that down onto the wire, and again that's going to give it an extra firm grip, because as the clay dries and then as it's fired, it will shrink at both these stages and really grip onto that wire, so those birds won't be easily able to come off. And then I do use a brush just to tidy up the slip. I haven't showed it here because I couldn't actually see. But a little bit later I do, when I've turned it to me. And then I leave that underneath cling film to dry slowly until it's completely dry and ready to be fired to bisqueware. And at that point I can start my glazing. I will be uploading a glazing video, so hit subscribe if you'd like to see how I glaze these pumpkins.